Okay, so a couple years ago, a long time ago, me and the Germans, we did a lot of star creation, a lot of other stuff, and basically we created these. They're thorium or uranium. I think they're thorium or uranium. It's basically radioactive. Well, it's they call it radioactive, but basically it's a really dense, basically really tightly packed uranium or hard metal. I mean, dense metal, really dense. It's the most super dense that you can possibly get. Basically, you get a react. The more dense the metal is, the more dense the metal is, the more likely it is to give off particles. Like because they're so tightly packed in there, and they're so dense that there's so many particles in there, basically that there's no room or whatever. Anyway, it's basically a really dense, really heavy metal, pretty much. Whenever you do high-end metal foundry, you get slag and stuff. Anyway, I don't know if it's really necessarily radioactive. It gives off some particles, but not really. Anyway, though, but it's so dense that basically it's just magnetism that's really holding it together or whatever. And realistically, it wants to basically, particles want to jump off of it pretty much. They want to go zinging off. Okay, so what an LSL shell is, Lucifer Starlight Shell, basically, LSLS. Okay, what it is basically, it's basically just a steel tube, pretty much. Round steel tube, nothing complicated there. And basically like this, right here. And then this part right here. And you actually you might have another tube of metal inside there. There are, I forget exactly what what it is. It's not, I don't think it's just one of these inside of a tube, but that would work. But usually it's another metal tube inside of this tube. So there's actually like 3 tubes that actually make it up. But different kinds of metals. I forget what the difference are. I think these two are reacting. Are reaction. So basically, this tube will react with this metal or something like that. The different kind of particles it gives off, because different kind of metals give off different kind of particles. So these two will react, and this basically just contains the reaction for a while, something like that. Anyway, basically, as it goes through space, pretty much when you light these two together. Basically, when it's basically like just like a match. Basically, when you apply heat here, these two start to react together. This one goes inside of this one. But basically, when you apply heat, these two will start to react together. Basically, they go. But there's so many particles, and it's so dense that that you're only losing microns of particles off of each. Basically, so the reaction builds in here. Until and builds basically this one, and this one is so dense that this one basically both of these are so dense, and mostly it just travels up the individual little line, basically. Pretty much a better example of it pretty much is basically if that one was basically like this, the particles basically just go up along in here. Mostly, and they gain in heat and temperature until these two become blobs, pretty much, or something like that. Anyway, I'm just going over the basics of it. Look up in Germany, you'll see the information on this shell. But basically, and this just kind of contains the two hot blobs and keeps them together and keeps them in A shape, basically, as this one is heating up. Anyway, I don't really know that much about it, but basically, it's my shell and pretty much Germany and all that other stuff. Anyway, but as it goes down the line, as it goes down the what's called, as it's traveling through the air, basically, it starts to give off particles like crazy in every direction. Little bits of metal will basically start zinging off, little bits of the hard metal, because it's not actually burned, but it basically zings off. And basically, when it gets to the target, it'll go through whatever. But these little particles on the way are also going out and going through whatever. So when there was a party over in here, and there was a party over here of people dancing, everybody in these two spots died. Everybody everywhere died. And that's one of the reasons why Zachary changed his name to because everybody knew Zachary had been a mass murderer and had been responsible for this. They took off with the shells and took off with everything after everyone, and just basically left a sea of dead, 75,000 people or 250,000, a lot of people basically, or a lot of people, all the parties, everyone died basically. They fired it from right here, and pretty much it was safe to about right here when it started to give off the particles. The reaction is pretty fast, so where it starts going like this with all the particles, basically blazing in every direction. And pretty much, but you can't really tell that it's giving off particles because the particles are just like so small. They're not even that big. There's like little bitty. It's like a little bitty particle. It's a particle about the yay big, but trillions of them. Absolutely trillions and trillions of particles. So when they looked at the people, they found little holes like about yay big in everyone. Everyone had little holes about this big or smaller. Basically, it looked like everyone had been hit by a needle 100 million times. That had basically gone through them, gone through the cars, gone through everything. Even the houses, even stone block walls, basically. Basically, it killed everyone at the party. And yeah, I mean, they found all these little bitty little holes. I mean, it was on the news basically, and it was considered an accident, but it wasn't really. I mean, it wasn't really an accident because I don't know. I guess they didn't know what that shell would do. Anyway, they had an old cannon, so they put it in the cannon. They were going to do a demonstration or whatever, and they didn't tell anyone what the shell was or where it was from or anything like that. They were just going to fire the shell, and they did. And then, like I say, I don't even think they knew it was radioactive. Anyway. Radioactive, well, radioactive it basically means a piece of metal that is giving off particles pretty much. So it's kind of deceptive about what radioactive is. Everything gives off particles some amount, basically. I mean, everything, me, you, that tile down there gives off particles. I mean, that light source right there is giving off a lot of particles. That's why it's bright. Anyway, it's all complicated stuff and all that other stuff, but basically Zachary found himself in the possession of basically some of my starlight shells, Lsls shells. And I use them for creating the sun, or the stars, basically. That's what I use them for. But I mean, after billions or trillions of years, I don't really do that anymore, and they were just basically sitting inside of a museum or inside of a warehouse. There's probably about 120 or maybe 1,000 of them, just lying in there basically inside their lead-lined cases and basically not being used for anything. So I think there's maybe 120, not that many really, considering. Anyway, they used the first one, and I think they might have gone back in. They might have stolen the first one, but then they went back in and stole the rest of them because they thought they had found a new way to, I don't know, come up on things. Anyway, Zachary didn't know anything about them. Nobody really knew anything about them. They're hundreds of years old. Nobody knew where they were from or what they were or even what LSLS meant. So they thought it was an acronym for something else, but it meant Lucifer star light shells. Anyway, so yeah. And they're mine. And I would have suggested or told them not to use it. But I guess a lot of people, the people who had built it, were already tortured and dead by then. I'm not really sure. I don't really know how the hell the USAF got their hands on them. They should have never been allowed to get near them. But anyway, yeah. So that's the LSLS shell, basically. Nuclear reactor reaction. And basically, you can look it up in Germany, and they tell all about how it works and everything else like that. And Bill Gates, I'm sure, has tried to hide it as much as possible, but that's basically how it works. It's a dense piece of metal and another dense piece of metal or something like that, and they react together. And basically, it's like what they call a fuse metal or whatever, where it starts the reaction and it basically gets really hot, and then the outer metal shell basically contains the heat as it's going to its target or going out. And basically, you can actually create stars with that, basically. Because in space, there's nowhere for the heat to go, so it basically just contains and continues to build and build and build and build, and you can create stars, big fusion reactions in space. And that's what I used it for, is creating like that star there and other stars. And even the planet Earth. You know, it's how you create the planets and stuff. So anyway, generally it's more for space than anything else, but Anyway, they thought it would be cool to kill their friends, I guess. But anyway, yeah.